I was sitting in the boardroom at Mercer Technologies, watching my son Derek present his proposal for the new client acquisition strategy when he looked directly at me, sitting in my usual spot against the back wall where the administrative staff sits, and he said, with this smirk, this condescending little smile, "My administrative assistant keeps telling me we need to slow down and focus on relationship building, but that's old school." Thinking, that's the kind of advice you get from people who don't understand modern business. And the entire room erupted in laughter. The CEO laughed, the VP of sales laughed, the other directors laughed, and my son, my only child, the boy I raised alone, the man I had mentored through every step of his career, stood there basking in their approval while using me as a punchline. And I sat there in my chair, feeling my face burn, feeling my chest tighten, feeling 32 years of sacrifice being reduced to a joke about being out of touch, about not understanding modern business, about being someone whose advice was worthless. And something inside me shifted, something cold and hard and final, because Derek didn't know it yet, but he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. My name is Patricia Jenkins. I'm 54 years old, and I've been working at Mercer Technologies for 26 years. I started as a receptionist back in 1998, when the company was just a small software startup with 12 employees and a dream. I've watched this company grow from nothing to a multi-million-dollar enterprise. I've outlasted 3 CEOs, survived 2 major recessions, seen departments come and go, and through it all, I've been here answering phones, scheduling meetings, managing calendars, and quietly keeping this place running. And 5 years ago, when my son Derek got hired as a junior analyst, fresh out of MIT with his computer science degree, I was proud. I was thrilled. I thought finally, my baby gets to work at the same company as me. Finally, I can see him every day, can watch him build his career, can maybe even help him navigate the corporate politics that I've spent decades mastering. But what I didn't expect, what I couldn't have predicted, was that having his mother work as an administrative assistant at the same company where he was trying to build his career as a rising tech executive would become his greatest source of shame. Derek was born when I was 22 years old. His father, Marcus, had promised me, the world had told me we'd build a life together, had sworn he'd be there for our family. But the minute I told him I was pregnant, Marcus disappeared, vanished like smoke, left me alone with a baby on the way and no support system. No money, no education beyond high school, and a future that looked bleak and terrifying. But I made a promise to that baby growing inside me. I promised I would give him everything I never had. I promised he would go to college, would have opportunities, would never struggle the way I struggled. And I kept that promise. I worked my way up from minimum wage jobs to that receptionist position at Mercer, and I held on to it like my life depended on it, because it did. I worked overtime whenever it was offered. I took on extra projects. I made myself indispensable. I learned everything about how the company operated, who the key players were, what made them tick, and slowly, painfully. Over years, I moved from receptionist to administrative assistant, and eventually to senior executive assistant, supporting the C-suite. And with each promotion came a little more money, a little more stability, a little more ability to provide for. Derek lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Atlanta for 19 years. Gave Derek the bedroom, while I slept on a futon in the living room. I bought his school supplies at discount stores while making my own lunch every single day to save money. I helped him with homework every night, even when I was exhausted. Even when I'd worked a 12-hour day, even when every bone in my body ached from exhaustion. I went to every parent-teacher conference, every science fair, every basketball game, even when it meant using my precious vacation days. Even when it meant choosing between attending his events and paying the electric bill on time. And every single decision I made, every sacrifice, every moment of choosing his needs over mine was focused on one singular goal: making sure Derek had opportunities. Making sure he could go to college, making sure he could have a career that didn't require the kind of backbreaking sacrifice I'd endured. Derek was brilliant, always had been. He taught himself to code when he was 12, built his first app when he was 14, got a full scholarship to MIT when he was 17. And I cried when that acceptance letter came, cried tears of joy and relief and gratitude because my baby, my brilliant baby, was going to have everything I'd worked for, everything I'd dreamed of, everything I'd sacrificed for. And when he graduated with honors, when he got multiple job offers, when he chose to work at Mercer Technologies, where I could watch him succeed, I thought, this is it. This is the payoff. This is what all those years of struggle were for. But what I didn't anticipate, what I foolishly failed to consider, was that Derek, having his mother work as an administrative assistant at the same company where he was trying to establish himself as a tech genius, would become a source of embarrassment, a liability, something he needed to distance himself from in order to succeed. It started small. So small I almost missed it in Derek's first month at Mercer. He stopped having lunch with me, stopped stopping by my desk to chat, stopped acknowledging me in the hallways, and when I asked him about it, he said, "Mom, it's weird having my mother here. People might think I only got this job because of you. I need to establish my own reputation." And I understood, or at least I tried to understand, because I remembered being young, remembered wanting to prove myself, remembered the fear of being seen as someone who didn't earn their position. So I backed off, gave him space, let him build his career without interference from his overly involved mother. But then it got worse. Derek started introducing me as Patricia, not as his mother. Just Patricia, like I was any other employee, like there was no relationship between us, like I hadn't spent 22 years raising him alone. And when I confronted him about it, he said, "Mom, it's just professional. You wouldn't want people to think I'm getting special treatment, right?" And I swallowed my hurt, swallowed my feelings, told myself this was temporary, told myself that once Derek was established, once he felt secure in his position, things would go back to normal. But they didn't. They just kept getting worse. By Derek's second year at Mercer, he had stopped coming to family dinners, stopped returning my calls, stopped acknowledging me at all unless absolutely necessary. And when we did interact, when circumstances forced us to communicate, he spoke to me the way he spoke to any other administrative assistant, with that polite, distant, professional tone. That said, "I'm busy. I'm important. I don't have time for this," and it hurt. It hurt in a way I couldn't fully articulate, because this was my son, the baby I'd raised, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, and he was treating me like I was invisible, like I was beneath him, like my decades of experience, my intimate knowledge of how this company worked, my years of navigating corporate politics meant nothing, because I was just an administrative assistant. But I told myself I was being sensitive. Told myself Derek was just focused on his career. Told myself that once he achieved his goals, once he felt successful, things would change. He'd remember who raised him, who supported him, who made his success possible. But I was wrong, so wrong, because the more successful Derek became, the worse his treatment of me got. Derek got promoted to senior analyst after 2 years, then to project manager, then to associate director, and with each promotion came more money, more status, more confidence, and more disdain for the mother who had gotten him there. He started wearing expensive suits, started eating at expensive restaurants, started hanging out with the other young executives, the ones who came from money, who had connections, who saw people, like me, people who worked administrative jobs, as fundamentally less than, and Derek absorbed their worldview, absorbed their disdain, absorbed their belief that success was about individual merit, about being smarter than everyone else, about transcending your background and leaving behind anyone who reminded you of where you came from. And I watched this transformation, watched my son become someone I didn't recognize, someone who valued money and status over loyalty and family, someone who was ashamed of where he came from, ashamed of how he got there, ashamed of me. And then came the boardroom meeting, the one where Derek mocked me in front of everyone, where he used my advice as a punchline, where he made it clear to everyone in that room that he saw me as out of touch, as irrelevant, as someone whose opinions didn't matter. And I sat there feeling something crack inside me, feeling the last thread of patience, the last shred of forgiveness, the last bit of hope that Derek would change, snap completely. And I made a decision, sitting there in that boardroom. While everyone laughed at me, I decided that if Derek wanted to pretend he'd built his career all on his own, If he wanted to act like my advice was worthless, if he wanted to treat me like I was nothing, then I would show him exactly what nothing felt like. I would show him what happened when he didn't have me protecting him, covering for him, fixing his mistakes, and I knew exactly how to do it. Because unlike Derek, who thought he knew everything, who believed his MIT degree made him smarter than everyone else, who assumed that success was just about technical skills, I understood something fundamental about corporate politics. I understood that information was power, that documentation was everything, that the person who controls the narrative controls the outcome. And I had documentation. I had so much documentation. Let me tell you about Derek's mistakes, the ones I'd been quietly fixing for 5 years, the ones he didn't even know about because I'd cleaned them up before anyone else noticed, the ones that would have destroyed his career if I hadn't been there protecting him. There was the Henderson project. Derek's first major assignment 2 years into his tenure at Mercer. He'd been tasked with developing a new software platform for one of our biggest clients, Henderson manufacturing a multi-million-dollar account that Mercer couldn't afford to lose, and Derek, in his arrogance, in his belief that he was smarter than everyone else, decided he didn't need to follow the established protocols, didn't need to check in with stakeholders, didn't need to do proper testing because he was Derek Jenkins, mid-graduate tech genius, and he knew better than everyone else. So he built the entire platform based on his assumptions about what the client needed, never once consulting with Henderson's team, never once verifying that his assumptions were correct. And when it came time to deliver the platform, when Henderson's director tested it, when they discovered that it didn't meet any of their actual requirements, they were furious, threatened to pull their entire account, threatened to sue for breach of contract, threatened to destroy Mercer's reputation in the industry. And Derek, he panicked, called me crying, said his career was over, said he didn't know what to do, said he'd made a terrible mistake. And what did I do? I fixed it. I spent 72 hours straight working with Henderson's director, rebuilding the platform from scratch, implementing all the features they actually needed, and I did it while Derek took credit for managing the crisis, while he presented the fixed platform to the Mercer leadership, while he got praised for his quick thinking and client management skills. And he never thanked me, never acknowledged what I'd done, never seemed to understand that I'd just saved his career. I just saved Mercer from losing a 7-figure account. I just saved his reputation. But to Derek, it was just his mom doing what moms do, cleaning up messes without expecting recognition or gratitude or even basic respect. Then there was the Martinez presentation 6 months ago. Derek had been selected to present Mercer's new artificial intelligence strategy to the board of directors. It was a huge opportunity, the kind of presentation that could make or break a career, the kind of visibility that could lead to a major promotion. And Derek had worked on it for weeks, had created this elaborate presentation full of technical jargon and complex algorithms and cutting-edge AI concepts. And he was so proud, so confident, so certain that his presentation was brilliant. And 2 days before the board meeting, Derek showed me his presentation, asked me to just give it a quick look. And I looked at it, and my heart sank, because the presentation was a disaster. It was too technical, too complicated, too focused on showing off Derek's knowledge, and not focused enough on what the board actually cared about, which was ROI, market positioning, competitive advantage, the business case for investing millions of dollars in AI development. And I told him, I said, Derek, this isn't going to work. The board doesn't care about the technical details. They care about how this makes us money, how this differentiates us from competitors, how this moves us forward strategically. And Derek, he looked at me with such disdain, such condescension, and he said, Mom, no offense, but you don't understand this stuff. This is advanced technology. This is the future. You're thinking like someone from the old days. And he dismissed me, dismissed my advice, dismissed 3 decades of watching board presentations, dismissed my intimate knowledge of what the Mercer board cared about, and I could have let it go, could have let him fail, could have let him walk into that boardroom and bomb his presentation and destroy his chances at promotion. But I didn't, because I'm his mother, because I couldn't stand to watch him fail, so I stayed up all night, rebuilt his entire presentation, restructured it around business, outcomes, around ROI, around competitive positioning. And I left it on his desk the morning of the board meeting with a note that said, "You might want to consider this approach." And Derek, he used my presentation. Word for word, presented it to the board, got a standing ovation, got praised for his strategic thinking, and got recommended for promotion to senior director. And did he thank me? Did he acknowledge that I'd saved him? Did he show even a shred of gratitude? No, he told people he'd stayed up all night revising. He told people he'd had a breakthrough. He told people his strategic vision had impressed the board, and he took all the credit, took all the praise, and never once mentioned that his mother, the administrative assistant, the woman he was ashamed of, had done all the work. And there were so many more incidents, so many more times when Derek had made mistakes, had cut corners, had been reckless or careless or arrogant. And I'd fixed it. I'd covered for him. I'd protected him, because that's what mothers do. We protect our children even when they don't deserve it, even when they don't appreciate it, even when they treat us like garbage. But sitting in that boardroom watching Derek mock me, watching him use my advice as a joke, watching him make it clear to everyone that he saw me as worthless, I realized something. I realized that my protection was enabling. Him was allowing him to be careless, to be arrogant, to believe that his success was entirely his own doing. And I realized that the kindest thing I could do, the most loving thing, the thing that would actually help Derek in the long run, was to stop protecting him, was to let him face the consequences of his own actions, was to show him exactly what happened when he didn't have me cleaning up his messes. But I wasn't going to just stop helping him. That would be too passive, too indirect, too easy for Derek to miss the point. No, I was going to actively destroy the one thing Derek cared about more than anything: his promotion to Vice President of Technology, the position he'd been working toward for 5 years, the role that came with a corner office of $300, 00 salary, stock options, and a seat at the executive table, the achievement that would prove he'd made it, that he'd transcended his working-class background, that he was nothing like his mother, who was just an administrative assistant. And I knew exactly how to do it, because 3 weeks earlier, Derek had made another mistake, a big one, the kind that could end careers, and as usual, he'd come to me to fix it. The Singapore project was Mercer's biggest initiative of the year. A partnership with a Singaporean tech company to expand Mercer's presence in Asian markets. It was worth $50 million. It was the company's primary growth strategy, and Derek had been appointed project lead. It was the assignment that was supposed to cement his VP promotion, that was supposed to prove he could handle executive-level responsibility. And Derek had screwed it up, had made promises to the Singaporean partners that Mercer couldn't keep, had overstated our technical capabilities, had committed to delivery timelines that were impossible to meet. And when the Singaporean partners started asking questions, started demanding proof that Mercer could deliver, Derek panicked, and he came to me crying. Said the whole deal was going to fall apart, said his career was over, said he needed help, and I helped him. I created detailed project documentation, I built realistic timelines, I drafted technical specifications that our team could actually deliver. I fixed everything, and I saved the deal, but this time I kept copies. I kept documentation of Derek's original promises, the ones he couldn't keep. I kept records of his communications, showing his misrepresentations. I kept evidence of all his mistakes, and I kept my fixies, kept proof that I was the one who'd actually saved the project. And I waited for the right moment, waited for Derek to push me too far, waited for him to give me a reason to use what I knew. And then came the boardroom meeting, the mockery, the public humiliation, the clear message that Derek saw me as nothing, and I knew it was time. 3 days after that meeting, I requested a meeting with James Mercer, the company's founder and CEO. I told his executive assistant. It was urgent. I told her it was about the Singapore project. I told her James would want to hear this, and James agreed to meet with me because we'd worked together for 26 years, because he trusted me, because he knew I didn't waste his time with trivial matters. I walked into James's office with a folder, with a USB drive, with documentation of everything. And James looked at me with concern. "Patricia, what's going on? Is everything all right?" And I sat down, across from him, and I said, "James, I need to talk to you about Derek Jenkins and the Singapore project." And James smiled that warm, paternal smile. "Patricia, Derek's doing fantastic work on that project. I'm actually planning to promote him to VP of Technology next month. He's earned it. That's what I need to talk to you about," I said, "because James Derek hasn't earned it. Everything you think Derek accomplished on the Singapore project, I did." And I opened the folder and I started showing him the evidence. I showed James Derek's original communications with the Singaporean partners, the ones where he'd overpromised, where he'd misrepresented Mercer's capabilities, where he'd committed to impossible timelines. Then I showed him my documentation, the realistic project plan I'd created, the technical specifications I'd written, the timeline I'd built that actually worked. James Derek nearly destroyed this deal. I said, he made promises we couldn't keep. He overstated our abilities. He set us up for failure. And when the Singaporean partners started asking questions, when they started demanding proof, Derek came to me begging for help, and I fixed it. I saved the project. I'm the reason we still have this deal. James studied the documents, his expression growing darker, his jaw tightening. "Patricia, why didn't you tell me this when it happened?" "Because he's my son," I said simply. "Because I wanted to protect him, because I thought he was young and learning and making mistakes he'd grow out of. But James, this isn't an isolated incident. This has been happening for 5 years. Every time Derek has gotten praised for his work, I've been the one actually doing it. Every time he's gotten credit for saving a project, I'm the one who saved it. Every time he's impressed you with his strategic thinking, he's been presenting my strategies." And I pulled out more documentation, the Henderson project, the Martinez presentation, a dozen other instances where I'd fixed Derek's mistakes, covered his errors, saved his career. And James sat there reading through everything, getting angrier and angrier. "Why are you telling me this now?" James asked finally. "What changed?" "What changed?" I said, "Is that 3 days ago, Derek stood in a boardroom full of executives and he mocked me. He used my advice as a punchline. He made it clear to everyone that he sees me as worthless, as out of touch, as someone whose opinions don't matter, and I realized that I've been enabling him. I've been teaching him that he can be careless, that he can be arrogant, that he can take credit for other people's work without consequences. And James, I can't do that anymore. I can't keep protecting someone who treats me with such disrespect, who has no appreciation for what I've done for him, who thinks his success is entirely his own doing." James was quiet for a long time, staring at the documents in front of him. Then he looked up at me. "Patricia, you understand what this means? If what you're telling me is true, if Derek has been taking credit for your work, if he's been making critical mistakes that you've been covering up, then I can't promote him. I can't put him in an executive position where one mistake could cost the company millions." "I know," I said, "and James, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this to hurt Derek. I'm doing this because he needs to learn that actions have consequences, that success isn't about taking credit for other people's work, that you can't build a career on lies and shortcuts, and someone else cleaning up your messes, and the kindest thing I can do, the most loving thing, is to let him face the consequences of his own actions." James nodded slowly. "I'm going to need to conduct a full investigation," he said. "I'm going to need to verify everything you've told me. I'm going to need to interview people, pull records, confirm that this is accurate." "I understand," I said. "I've documented everything. It's all there." "Patricia, I want you to know," James said, "that what you're doing takes courage. It takes integrity. Most people wouldn't be willing to do this, especially not about their own son. Most people haven't spent 5 years watching their son treat them like garbage," I said. "Most people haven't sat in a boardroom while their child mocked them in front of everyone. Most people haven't sacrificed their entire life for someone who's ashamed of them." "Still," James said, "this can't be easy." "No," I agreed. "It's not easy. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's necessary. James spent the next 2 weeks conducting his investigation. He interviewed people who'd worked with Derek. He reviewed project files, he examined communications. He traced the timeline of every major project Derek had worked on. And the more he investigated, the more problems he found. Because once you start really looking, once you stop taking someone's success at face value, once you examine the details, you see all the cracks, all the shortcuts, all the places where someone has been coasting on someone else's work, and Derek had been coasting on mine for 5 years. James discovered that every major success Derek had claimed, every strategic victory, every technical innovation could be traced back to me, to my suggestions, my guidance, my work. And he discovered something else. He discovered that Derek had been systematically taking credit, not just from me, but from junior team members, from other departments, from anyone whose work he could claim as his own. And suddenly Derek's meteoric rise started to look less like brilliance and more like strategic theft. And when James presented his findings to the executive team, when he showed them the documentation, when he revealed the pattern of Derek taking credit for other people's work, the decision was unanimous. Derek Jenkins would not be promoted to vice president. Instead, he would be demoted to senior analyst, placed on a performance improvement plan, and given 6 months to prove he could actually do the work he'd been claiming credit for, or he would be terminated. James called me into his office after the executive team meeting. "Patricia, I wanted to tell you in person, the executive team has decided not to promote Derek. In fact, we're demoting him to senior analyst." I nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions: relief, vindication, guilt, sadness, and Patricia, there's something else. James continued, "The executive team was so impressed with your work, with the documentation you provided, with the strategic thinking. You've demonstrated that we'd like to offer you a different role. We're creating a new position, Chief of Staff to the CEO. It would involve strategy, development, project management, executive communications, basically doing officially what you've apparently been doing unofficially for years. The salary would be $180,000 plus benefits and stock options." I stared at James, unable to process what he was saying. "You're offering me a promotion?" "Yes," James said. "Patricia, you've been here for 26 years. You know this company better than almost anyone. You have strategic insight, you have project management skills, you have the respect of everyone in this organization except apparently your own son. And it's time we recognized that, time we gave you a role that reflects your actual contributions." "But I'm 54 years old." I said, "I don't have a college degree. You're just one of the most valuable employees this company has." James interrupted, "And Patricia, age and formal education aren't what matter here. Competence matters, insight matters, integrity matters, and you have all of that. So, what do you say, will you accept the position?" I thought about it. Thought about Derek, about how angry he would be, about how this would look to him, about whether I was being vindictive. But then I thought about myself, about 26 years of being underestimated, about decades of being invisible, about a lifetime of putting everyone else's needs before my own, and I said, "Yes, James, I accept." The announcement went out the next day. Patricia Jenkins, formerly senior executive assistant, was being promoted to chief of staff to the CEO. Derek Jenkins, formerly associate director, was being demoted to senior analyst, and the office exploded with gossip. People whispered in hallways, speculated in break rooms, tried to piece together what had happened. And the truth came out slowly. Inevitably, people started talking about how Derek had been taking credit for other people's work, about how his mother had been covering for him, about how the golden boy of Mercer Technologies had been exposed as a fraud. He saw Derek for the first time 3 days after the announcement. He came to my desk, his face pale, his eyes red. "Mom, we need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," I said calmly, continuing to organize files. "You got what you deserved. You destroyed my career," Derek said, his voice shaking with anger. "You went to James, you exposed me, you ruined everything I'd worked for." "No, Derek," I said, looking up. At him, "I stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own actions. You destroyed your career by taking credit for work. You didn't do by making promises you couldn't keep by being arrogant and careless and believing that your MIT degree meant you didn't have to actually do the work." "But why?" Derek demanded. "Why would you do this to me? I'm your son." "Exactly," I said. "You're my son. And for 5 years I've watched you become someone I don't recognize, someone who treats people with disrespect, someone who takes credit for other people's work, someone who's ashamed of where he came from. And I realized that by protecting you, by covering for your mistakes, by letting you take credit for my work, I was enabling that behavior. I was teaching you that you could be that person without consequences. And Derek, I love you too much to let you continue down that path. So you ruined my promotion. You destroyed my career," Derek said bitterly. "I saved you from yourself." I replied, "Because Derek, if you'd gotten that VP position, if you'd continued to succeed based on lies and stolen work, eventually you would have made a mistake so big that even I couldn't fix it. Eventually, you would have destroyed not just your career, but potentially this entire company and everyone in it, and I couldn't let that happen." Derek stared at me with such hatred, such betrayal. "I will never forgive you for this." "That's your choice," I said. "But Derek, one day, when you've had time to think, when you've had time to mature, when you've learned to actually do the work and earn your success, you're going to understand that what I did wasn't cruel. It was the most loving thing I could have done." Loving. Derek spat the word like it was poison. "You humiliated me, you exposed me, you made me look like a fool in front of everyone." "No, Derek, you did that to yourself when you stood in that boardroom and mocked me, when you treated me with such disrespect, when you made it clear you saw me as worthless. You showed everyone who you really were. I just made sure they saw the full picture." Derek left my desk that day, and he didn't speak to me for 6 months. He blocked my number. He refused my emails. He told our family that I had betrayed him, that I had destroyed his career out of jealousy, that I couldn't stand to see him succeed. And some family members believed him. Some people took his side, thought I'd been too harsh, thought a mother should never do that to her son. But I didn't care, didn't need their approval, didn't need validation, because I knew the truth, knew that what I'd done was right, was necessary, was the only way to teach Derek a lesson he desperately needed to learn. And slowly over those 6 months, something changed. Derek, in his new role as senior analyst under close supervision, without anyone to clean up his messes, started to struggle, started to face the reality of his own limitations. And he had 2 choices. He could quit, could leave. Mercer could go to another company where no one knew about his failures, or he could actually learn, could actually do the work, could actually become the person he'd been pretending to be. And to his credit, Derek chose the latter. He started asking questions, started admitting when he didn't know something, started actually collaborating with his team instead of trying to take credit for their work. And slowly, painfully, he started to change, started to become competent, started to earn the respect he'd previously demanded. And then, one day, 8 months after the demotion, Derek showed up at my new office, knocked on my door, stood there looking nervous and humble and completely different from the arrogant man who'd mocked me in that boardroom. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What do you want, Derek?" "I want to apologize," he said, sitting down. "I want to tell you that you were right about everything. I was taking credit for other people's work. I was cutting corners. I was coasting on your protection. And I was treating you with disrespect, treating you like you were, beneath me and Mom. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for mocking you in that boardroom. I'm sorry for being ashamed of you. I'm sorry for not appreciating everything you did for me." I sat there looking at my son, really looking at him, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. I saw humility. I saw genuine remorse. I saw someone who had been broken down and rebuilt into something better. "Why are you apologizing now?" I asked. "Because I've spent the last 8 months actually doing my job," Derek said. actually working without shortcuts, without taking credit for other people's contributions, without you fixing my mistakes. And I've realized how hard it is. I've realized how much I didn't know. I've realized that every success I thought I'd earned was actually because you were protecting me and Mom. I've realized something else. I've realized that the way I treated you, the disrespect, the mockery, the shame I felt about you working as an administrative assistant, it wasn't about you at all. It was about me. It was about my own insecurity, about my fear that people would think I only got my job because of you, about my desperate need to prove I belonged with the mid-graduates and the tech geniuses and the people who came from money. And do you, I asked, do you belong with them? I don't know, Derek said honestly. I'm working on it. I'm actually learning. I'm actually developing real skills. But Mom, I've also realized that belonging with them isn't what matters. What matters is being someone I can be proud of, someone who does good work, who treats people with respect, someone who never forgets where he came from. And Mom, I forgot. I forgot everything you taught me. I forgot the values you instilled in me. I forgot that success isn't about titles or money or impressing people. It's about integrity and hard work and being grateful to the people who helped you get there. I felt tears prick my eyes, felt years of hurt and anger start to dissolve. Derek, I need you to understand something. I didn't expose you to hurt you. I didn't destroy your promotion to punish you. I did it because I love you, because I could see you becoming someone who would eventually self-destruct, becoming someone who built their entire life on lies and shortcuts. And I couldn't watch that happen. I couldn't keep enabling it. I know that now, Derek said. I didn't understand it. Then I was so angry, so hurt, so convinced you'd betrayed me. But Mom, over these past months, as I've struggled, as I've had to actually earn respect, as I've learned what real work looks like, I've come to understand that you didn't destroy my career. You saved it. Because if I'd gotten that VP position, if I'd continued down the path I was on, I would have eventually made a mistake so catastrophic that I would have lost everything, and it would have been entirely my own fault. We talked for 3 hours that day. Derek. And I really talked for the first time in years, and Derek told me about the pressure he'd felt at MIT, about being one of the few black students in his program, about feeling like he had to work twice as hard to be seen as half as good, about the imposter syndrome that made him desperate to prove himself, about how having his mother work as an administrative assistant felt like proof that he didn't really belong. And I listened and I understood, because I'd felt those same pressures, had experienced that same discrimination, had spent decades being underestimated because of my race, my gender, my lack of formal education. But I'd never let that turn me into someone who disrespected others, who took credit for work I didn't do, who was ashamed of where I came from. Derek, I said when he finished, I understand the pressure you felt. I understand the discrimination. I understand feeling like you don't belong. But baby, those experiences should make you more compassionate, more humble, more appreciative of the people who help you. Not less. You let your insecurity turn you into someone who hurt people, who used people, who looked down on the very person who sacrificed everything for you. And that's on you. That's not about MIT or tech culture or racism. That's about the choices you made. I know, Derek said, and I'm working to be better. I'm working to be the man you raised me to be. Good, I said, because Derek, I didn't raise you to be successful. I raised you to be good, to be kind, to be someone who treats people with respect, regardless of their job title or their education or their background, and success that comes at the cost of your integrity, that comes from using people, that comes from being ashamed of where you came from. That's not success. That's failure. It's been 2 years since that conversation. 2 years since Derek apologized, since we started rebuilding our relationship. And I'm proud to say that my son has changed, has really, truly changed. He's still at Mercer Technologies, still working as a senior analyst, but now he's earning his position, is doing real work, is respected, not because of who his mother is, but because of his own competence, his own contributions, his own integrity. And last month, Derek got promoted to associate director again, but this time he earned it. This time the promotion was based on his actual work, his actual achievements, his actual value to the company. And when James Mercer announced Derek's promotion at the company meeting, Derek did something that shocked everyone. He stood up in front of the entire company and he said, "Before we move on, I need to say something. I need to acknowledge someone without whom this promotion wouldn't be possible." And Derek looked directly at me. "My mother, Patricia Jenkins, is the reason I'm here. The reason I have this career. The reason I have this opportunity. She raised me alone. She worked her way up from receptionist to chief of staff. She sacrificed everything so I could have opportunities she never had, and for years I repaid that sacrifice by being ashamed of her, by treating her with disrespect, by taking credit for her work." The room was completely silent, everyone staring at Derek. 2 years ago, my mother did the hardest thing a mother can do. She held me accountable, she exposed my mistakes, she destroyed a promotion I hadn't earned, and I hated her for it. I thought she'd betrayed me, but I was wrong. She saved me. She taught me that success built on lies isn't success at all. She taught me that real achievement comes from integrity and hard work and treating people with respect. And Mom, I know I can never fully make up for how I treated you, but I want you to know that everything I am, everything I've accomplished, everything I hope to become is because of you." The room erupted in applause. People stood, people cheered, and I sat there in my seat in the front row, tears streaming down my face, feeling years of pain, and anger and hurt finally dissolve into something like peace. And after the meeting, Derek came to me, hugged me, whispered, "Thank you, Mama. Thank you for loving me enough to teach me that lesson, even though it cost you our relationship for a year. Even though people judged you. Even though it was the hardest thing you ever did, you saved me." And I hugged him back. Hugged my son, who had finally learned, who had finally grown, who had finally become the man I always knew he could be. I'm 56. Now still working as chief of staff at Mercer Technologies, still using my decades of experience to help guide this company. And my relationship with Derek is stronger than it's ever been. We have lunch together every week, we talk about work, about life, about the lessons we've both learned, and Derek often asks my advice. Now, genuinely asks values, my opinion, implements my suggestions, and credits me publicly when my ideas contribute to his success and watching my son succeed, earning it. The right way, building his career on his own merit, while also acknowledging the people who helped him, is better than any promotion, any salary, any recognition I could ever receive. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, if I wish I'd handled things differently, if I think there was a better way to teach Derek that lesson. And the truth is, I don't know. Maybe I could have sat him down and had a conversation. Maybe I could have set boundaries without destroying his promotion. But I also know that Derek wasn't listening, wasn't hearing me, wasn't capable of understanding the lesson until he lost everything, until he had to face the consequences of his own actions. And sometimes that's what love looks like. Sometimes love means letting people fall, means holding them accountable, means refusing to protect them from themselves, even when it breaks your heart. And it did break my heart watching Derek struggle, watching him fail, watching him hate me for a year was the hardest thing I've ever endured. Harder than raising him alone. Harder than working 3 jobs, harder than any sacrifice I made over the years. But it was also necessary because Derek needed to learn that success isn't about shortcuts or taking credit for other people's work. Success is about integrity, about hard work, about treating people with respect, about remembering where you came from and honoring the people who helped you get there. And the only way he was going to learn that was by losing everything and having to rebuild from the ground up. James Mercer retired last year, and before he left, he pulled me aside. "Patricia, I want you to know something. When you came to me 2 years ago, when you told me about Derek, I almost didn't believe you. I almost dismissed it because Derek was so successful, so impressive, so confident, and you were just an administrative assistant. No offense. None taken, I said. But then I looked at the evidence, James continued, and I realized that we'd all been fooled. We'd all bought into Derek's performance. We'd all assumed that confidence meant competence, that a good presentation meant good work, and we'd all overlooked you. We'd all assumed that because you were an administrative assistant, you couldn't possibly be the strategic mind behind Derek's success. And Patricia, I'm sorry. It took Derek's failures for us to see your value. I'm sorry we didn't recognize your contributions years ago. I'm sorry you had to sacrifice your relationship with your son to get the recognition you deserved. James, I said, I didn't expose Derek to get recognition. I did it to save him. I know, James said, and that's what makes you remarkable, Patricia. You had every reason to be bitter, to be angry, to use that information to get revenge. But you didn't. You used it to teach your son a lesson he needed to learn. And in the process, you showed everyone in this company what real integrity looks like, what real strength looks like. And Patricia, I want you to know that you've changed this company. You've changed how we evaluate talent, how we recognize contributions, how we think about success, and that's a legacy that's going to last long after both of us are gone. Derek is 32, now married to a wonderful woman named Keisha, who works as a social worker, who understands struggle, who values the things that really matter. And when Derek introduced us, when I met Keisha for the first time, she hugged me and whispered, "Thank you." For what? I asked. For raising a man who knows how to admit when he's wrong. Keisha said, for teaching him that success isn't about ego or status, for showing him what real strength looks like. Derek tells me all the time that you're his hero, that you're the strongest person he knows. And after hearing your story, I understand why. Derek and Keisha have a daughter now, my granddaughter Amara, who is 2 years old and beautiful and perfect. And when Derek holds her, when he looks at her with such love, such wonder, such fierce protectiveness, I see the man I raised. I see the boy who used to hug me and tell me I was his whole world. I see the son I almost lost but managed to save. And when Derek brings Amara to visit, when we sit in my living room and Derek tells Amara stories about her grandmother, stories about how I worked my way up from receptionist to chief of staff, stories about how I taught him the most important lesson of his life, I feel this sense of completion, this sense of purpose, this understanding that everything I went through, all the struggle, all the sacrifice, all the pain, was leading to this moment, to this family, to this legacy of strength and integrity. And love, Derek tells Amara, your grandmother is the strongest woman I know. She raised me by herself. She worked harder than anyone I've ever met, and when I made mistakes, when I treated her badly, when I became someone I shouldn't have been, she loved me enough to teach me a hard lesson. She loved me enough to let me fail. She loved me enough to risk our relationship to save me from myself and Amara. When you grow up, I want you to be like your grandmother. I want you to be strong. I want you to be humble. I want you to remember where you come from and honor the people who help you get there. And Amara. She looks at me with those big, beautiful eyes, and she reaches for me, and I hold her. And I think about the woman I was 34 years ago, the scared 22-year-old. Single mother who didn't know how she was going to survive, who didn't know if she could give her son a good life, who was terrified she would fail. And I think about how far I've come, how much I've endured, how many times I could have given up but didn't. And I think about the fact that my granddaughter is growing up in a world where she'll know her grandmother not as just an administrative assistant, but as a chief of staff, as a woman who built a career through decades of hard work, as someone who had the courage to hold her own son accountable even when it cost her everything. The board of directors at Mercer Technologies has asked me to consider becoming CEO when our current CEO retires in 2 years. Patricia, the board chair, told me, you have the strategic vision, the operational knowledge, the leadership skills, everything we need in a CEO, and it's time Mercer had leadership that reflects a different path to success. Not just Ivy League graduates, not just people who came from money, but someone who worked their way up, someone who knows this company from the ground up, someone who understands that real success comes from integrity and hard work. And I'm considering it. I'm actually considering becoming CEO of a company where I started as a receptionist 28 years ago. And if I take that position, I'll be one of the few Black women CEOs in tech. One of the few people without a college degree running a major technology company. And that matters. That representation, that proof that there are multiple paths to success, that you don't need an Ivy League degree or family connections or wealth to achieve greatness. Derek tells me I should do it. Mom, you deserve this. You've earned this. You've spent 3 decades building this company, and it's time you got the recognition you deserve. And maybe he's right. Maybe it is time. Maybe I've spent enough years being underestimated, being invisible, being the person who made things happen without getting credit. And Keisha agrees. Patricia, you'd be an inspiration. You'd show women like me, women who didn't come from privilege, who don't have fancy degrees, that we can make it too, that success isn't just for people who fit a certain mold. And when I think about Amara, about the world she's growing up in, about the examples she'll see, I think maybe it is important. Maybe representation matters. Maybe showing her that her grandmother could go from receptionist to CEO is a lesson worth teaching. But regardless of whether I become CEO, regardless of what titles I hold or what recognition I receive, the thing I'm most proud of, the achievement that matters most, isn't my career, isn't my salary, isn't my position. It's my son. It's the fact that Derek Jenkins is a good man, is someone who treats people with respect, is someone who does honest work, is someone who acknowledges the people who helped him, is someone who will raise his daughter with the values I taught him, and that's worth everything, that's worth all the struggle, all the sacrifice, all the pain. Because at the end of the day, success isn't measured in promotions or salaries or corner offices. Success is measured in the quality of your character, in the integrity of your actions, in the love you give and receive, in the legacy you leave. And by those measures, I'm the most successful person I know. So if you're watching this, if you're in a situation where someone you love is taking you for granted, is disrespecting you, is using you without acknowledging your contributions, I want you to know that you don't have to accept it. You don't have to keep giving, you don't have to keep protecting people from the consequences of their own actions. And I'm not saying you should destroy their career. I'm not saying you should expose their mistakes. I'm not saying my way is the only way or even the best way. But I am saying that you deserve respect, that your contributions matter, that your knowledge and experience and wisdom have value, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable, even when it costs you, even when people judge you. Even when it breaks your heart, because accountability is love, consequences are love. Teaching people that they can't take you for granted is love. And if you're watching this and you're someone like Derek, was someone who has been taking credit for other people's work, someone who has been disrespecting the people who helped you, someone who has been ashamed of where you came from, I want you to stop. I want you to look around at the people who supported you, who sacrificed for you, who made your success possible, and I want you to acknowledge them. I want you to thank them. I want you to show them the respect they deserve, because one day they might not be there. One day, you might not get another chance. One day, you might realize too late that you took for granted the most important people in your life, and that regret, that guilt, that knowledge that you can never make it right will haunt you forever. So don't wait. Don't let pride or ego or shame keep you from acknowledging the people who made you who you are. My son ignored my advice and mocked me in front of everyone, made me feel worthless after 32 years of sacrifice, after 5 years of protecting him from his own mistakes, after a lifetime of putting his needs before my own. And I could have kept quiet, could have kept protecting him, could have let him continue down a path that would have eventually destroyed him. But I didn't. I held him accountable. I exposed his mistakes. I destroyed his promotion. And yes, it was painful. Yes, it almost destroyed our relationship. Yes, people judged me, but it also saved my son, taught him lessons, he desperately needed to learn, transformed him into a man I'm proud of, into someone who will teach his daughter the values I taught him. And that's worth everything, worth every moment of pain, worth every accusation, worth every person who said I went too far. Because at the end of the day, my son is a good man, and our relationship is stronger than it's ever been. And that's all that matters. So thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for understanding that sometimes love looks like letting people fall, that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is hold people accountable, that sometimes saving someone means first destroying everything they think they've built. And if you got something from this story, if it made you think about your own relationships, your own boundaries, your own willingness to accept disrespect, then I'm glad I shared it. I'm glad my pain became a lesson. I'm glad my story can help someone else find the courage to stand up for themselves, to demand respect, to refuse to be taken for granted, because everyone deserves to be valued. Everyone's contributions matter. Everyone has the right to hold others accountable. And if my story helps even one person understand that, then every moment of heartbreak, every moment of doubt, every moment of fear that I'd lost my son forever was worth it. And to my son, to Derek, to the man who learned the hard way what it means to honor your mother, I want you to know, I love you. I'm proud of you, and I'm grateful every single day that you were willing to learn, willing to grow, willing to become the man I always knew you could be. And that's the greatest gift a child can give their parent. Not success, not recognition, not achievements, but the willingness to learn, to change, to become better. And you did that, Derek. You really did that, and I will be grateful for that, for the rest of my life. So keep being that man. Keep honoring where you came from. Keep teaching Amara what you learned, and know that I will always be here, always be your mother, always be the woman who loved you enough to destroy your promotion, to save your soul, because that's what mothers do. That's what real love looks like. That's what family means. Did this story resonate with you? Have you ever been in a situation where someone you loved took you for granted, where you felt invisible, where you had to make a difficult choice to teach someone a lesson? Share your experience in the comments below. Because these stories, these moments of standing up for yourself are so important, are so powerful, are reminders that we all deserve respect, that we all matter, that we all have the right to hold others accountable. And if this story made you think about your own life, your own relationships, your own worth, then please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel, because I have more real-life stories, more lessons, more moments that will challenge you and make you think. There's a whole playlist of family drama stories on my channel. Click the video on your screen right now to watch about a grandmother who discovered her daughter-in-law's secret and had to make an impossible choice. These stories will remind you that family is complicated, that love is hard, that sometimes the people we sacrifice for are the ones who hurt us most, but also that accountability is possible, that relationships can heal, that people can change. See you in the comments, and remember, never let anyone make you feel like you don't matter, like your contributions don't count, like you should accept being disrespected because you matter. Your work matters. Your sacrifices matter, and you have every right to demand respect, no matter who that person is. Stay strong, everyone. And remember, sometimes destroying something is the only way to save it.